Can everyone hear me? Yeah? Thank you. Thank you. Welcome, everyone, to an evening with CAConrad, poetry rituals for deviant beings of all kinds. Here's what I first learned from reading CAConrad, and I'd almost say from the person himself, who I just actually met tonight, and we're forever friends because he shared chocolate with me. Because when encountering CAConrad on the page, one is drawn into a sensibility that comforts you, that surprises you, that unsettles you in the most visceral and innately satisfying ways, when perhaps our embedded secrets are manifest on the page. How we move through the world, how we interact with others, how we love and hate, and how we despair at cruel humanity. CA's somatic poetry exercises made me truly, and perhaps for the first time, slow down and think about expression, about how a poem really comes to be. To quote CA, "A poetry which investigates that seemingly infinite space between body and spirit by using any possible thing around or of the body to channel the body out and or in towards spirit. An engagement with the spirit of things. Ultimately, one must be present in the action of communing with your environment and its inhabitants, a bucket, a piece of dark chocolate, a penny, a cobweb. And then even further, a bus journey in which you must feel your body vibrate to the rhythms of a vehicle and allow your mind to form questions of magnitude, such as, how is this your life? How are you free and not free? It's impossible to read these, for want of a better word, instructions and think, what am I missing? What beauty and inspiration have I failed to notice? In a piece written for the online curated space for poetics, The Volta, CA says, let's be honest about our culture and say that anyone who makes us remember we are naked animals under these clothes is dangerous. He's right. Human beings kill for a patch of land. They design and perpetuate violence and prejudice. Acknowledging we're criminals isn't something we want to be encouraged to do. We're simple and destructive creatures. But CAConrad has given us a great gift by way of celebrating one part of our simplicity, that of recognition, of the tiny things of the world that inhabit their selves as much as we do. It's as though he's saying, step outside yourself to become yourself. And also possibly that poetry might save us. Write, he says. See what poems wait inside the writing. Sit your poet ass on the floor and then write. So that's what I learned, and that's the advice at least I try to follow. As for my students at the University of Amsterdam, they encountered the surreal, savage, tender, filthily hilarious, profound poetry collection, The Book of Frank, in the quite limiting confines of academia, but nevertheless responded in a way I found so liberating, making comments such as, I never loved an anti-hero as much as Frank. I almost believe that inanimate objects have souls. And most tellingly, I didn't like poetry before this. The Book of Frank is a satirical phantasmagoria, a portrayal of gender identity and queerness that leads us into scenarios that defy logic. Genitals made out of candy, and even more genitals, those of Jack Kerouac, served up on a plate. Pigs that talk. Animated dollar bills. the shape-shifting protagonist Frank who dies and dissolves multiple times. But it's also deadly serious. We're told in a manner often devoid of obscurity that the world may be more skewed and irrational than anything created in a fertile mind. Absurdity is perhaps the only way to deal with reality. Our reality being the stifling of sexual freedom, all definitions of abuse, the slaughter of animals, the systematic destruction of our biosphere. However we seek another's weakness is our tyranny, says Frank, just before he gives a sea bass a sandwich filled with hooks. Eileen Myles, a wonderful poet who wrote the afterword of the Book of Frank, does a far better job than me in defining where CAConrad writes from and why his poetry speaks so universally. To quote her, "In Conrad's world, the parameters are unknowable because that is the scary and real nature of our time. In piecing together, configuring and releasing his extreme miniatures, agonized fables, poems about America, CAConrad includes us in all the enormous outside of his heart, which is the world in all its possibility." In an interview in 2012, CA was asked by another poet and editor, Lisa Marie Basile, "Does writing keep us from falling apart? Does our writing become extra-physical?" CA replied, "Last night I woke to smoke and fire engines. The building next to mine was on fire, the building I share a wall with, and I had to crawl down 3 flights of steps because the smoke was so thick. But I want to say to your question that while I was standing on the street watching firemen chop a hole into my neighbor's roof and pour hundreds of gallons of water into their living room, that I was creating a somatic poetry exercise. Part of it involves meditating on your stuff, the things that survived." And he continues, "I agree that the body is not the only way we exist, which is why I separate or expose the word soma living inside somatic. Soma is the spirit, and adding a tic makes it somatic, or a body surrounding a spirit. But does writing keep us from falling apart? I want my blood, my vomit, my piss and semen in my poems." It's a rare poet who can convey the shitty, terrible, glorious, deviant materiality of human existence, of being in the world alongside the ineffable problems we face as a spiritual thinking being. Quite simply the fact of our life and of our death. In accessible and yet constantly movable language. In reading CA's poems, we're challenged, we're consoled, we're entertained, we're scandalized, we're moved. I'll close with another quote from Eileen Myles, who says, "I've never seen him occupy a room, especially one he reads his work in, where he hasn't affected a sea change in most of its inhabitants by the time he's done." Are we all deviants? Let's hope so. And if not, may you turn into one. Because, as CA says in Eco-Deviance, when you die, whether human or ape, 80% of you evaporates. Let's welcome the unparalleled, warm, wonderful CAConrad.
Thank you so much. That was beautiful. I have 4 microphones to read from. It's exciting. I can't wait. Let's see. That was a beautiful introduction. Thank you so much. I'll do my best. All right. So this is a piece that I wrote. You don't have to know this, but I just feel like telling you. Plasma comes up because I was in Albuquerque, New Mexico. While I was living in Philadelphia. This is back in the 90s. This is a poem that I wrote recently, but it was about the situation. I had a boyfriend in the 90s who was very sick. He was HIV positive, and I heard about these classes in Albuquerque, New Mexico, where you could learn about healing herbs that people were learning about. So I went down there without thinking about the fact that I didn't have money, and because you just do, right? You love somebody, like, we'll just go. And then, of course, you get there and you're like, wait, I really do need money. This is the United States. You need money to do anything or die. So I was realizing that anyway, I went and was selling my plasma, but I found out that I could go across town and sell it again. You're only supposed to sell it once a week. So that's what this is about. I was kind of dizzy at class. Wondering about our demise while driving to Disneyland with abandon. Don't be afraid of all we have pending. Plasma I sold in Albuquerque broke even with food I purchased to produce it. We can manage. We can start under this tree. A quiet hour of dozing into the bark will reveal the step forward. Things thinking about each other. This crystal and feather asked me to bring them together, put them behind the books. They want a private conversation. That means me getting lost to fellowship with grass, soil, and little stones who tell me there is no clear sense of when we leave this world. An owl drops a mouse in front of me. It doesn't have to mean something, but it probably does. Help fishing a glass eye out of the garbage disposal was my favorite time helping anyone. He was so happy pushing it back into his head, shaking my hand at the same time. We both wished he wasn't my boyfriend's brother. Head out window on the baptism highway. Shake tall buildings out of my loving you, down, far, far, far down by a rock at the water. Finish cooking soup with violins. Everything could use a melody to set it right, mitigate suffering. You care. You cannot with success deny needing violins. Okay, trombones. The trombones enter the pasta entering our bodies. The microscope shows there is song between the grains. The wind the wheat endured is a taste the animal carried forward, immersion of hours through a loosening bone. We are without the timing of the beetle, a sound that cannot get to where we left our homes in shame. Act like polka dot on Minnie Mouse's skirt. I am not a family-friendly faggot. I tell your children about war, about their tedious future careers, all the taxes bankrolling a racist, tyrannical military. I'm the faggot at dinner asking to be alone with the children. Tell them their future happiness depends entirely on how well they cultivate rebellion against any structure that does not hold their autonomy and creative intelligence as a priority. Children, your bliss is at stake. Children, listen carefully for the lies your parents tell you. Children, prepare for joy in ways none of them will ever imagine. Prepare to live with no regrets. So these are poems that come out of rituals that I've created, and I didn't talk about those rituals, but I'm going to read the next ritual, and then I'm going to read the resulting poem. And I'm very excited that Wolfram, are you here somewhere? I can't see him. I think he's here somewhere. Oh, hi. Wolfram made these extraordinary broadsides that he brought this evening for sale that he made by hand. That it's for the resulting poem. The poem is titled, I Hope I'm Loud When I'm Dead. I'm sure it'll happen. But I'm going to read the ritual first. I'm not going to bore you with why I do the rituals. We might talk about that later. Or not. Let's see. So this is titled MIA Escalator for Jen Benka and Carol Mirakov. I rode several of my favorite escalators in Philadelphia, taking notes up and down the vantages. At the top and bottom of the ride, I would show photographs of myself to strangers and ask, "Excuse me, have you seen this person?" Sometimes there was confusion. "Isn't that you?" I'd reply, "No. Many people think I look like her. But have you seen her?" I feel very fortunate to have been born before the ultrasound machine. My generation was the last generation to have a male and female name waiting at the other end of the birth canal. My generation is the last to have our mothers touch their bellies, talking to us as male and female, pink or blue, both pink and blue. Have you seen this person? I enjoyed my conversations with strangers and made at least one new friend, a handsome man who knew I was the person in the photograph, that person. I am that person, and agreed. The ultrasound machine gives the parents the ability to talk to the unborn by their gender, taking the intersex 9-month conversation away from the child. The opportunities limit us in our new world. Encourage parents to not know. Encourage parents to allow anticipation on either end. Escalators are a nice ride, slowly rising and falling, riding while riding, notes for the poem, meeting new people at either end. Excuse me. My escalator notes became a poem. So then this is the poem. I hope I'm loud when I'm dead. I have a mannequin for a paperweight. It is difficult to type with such a large paperweight. I reach around lovers late into night typing. From behind, it is impossible to tell which is Virgil. Poetry can be of use. The field of flying bullets the hand reaches through. Loving the aftertaste. Finding a deeper third taste. Many are haunted by human cruelty through the centuries. I am haunted by our actions since breakfast. You said too much poetry. I said too much war. The biggest mistake for love is straining. There was a door-marked mistake we entered. You said too much fooling around. I said fuck off and die. Frankly. So this is a book that came out a couple years ago. The first book I was reading from is the newer book. But these compile some of the pieces that I started a decade ago when I started doing the rituals. And it's lovely seeing you all out there. Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me, Yost, and everybody. This is pretty terrific. So, you know what? I am going to tell a little bit about this. So I started because I want to talk about it through this piece. So I grew up in a factory town in rural Pennsylvania. All my family are factory workers, and it's a military family. So it's kind of like a real hard knocks kind of like we don't have time for your poems bullshit kind of place, and that's fine because I don't really care what they think either, and. But I love them, but it's very intense there, and I wanted absolutely not a single thing to do with these factories because I saw how it was destroying them. And so I moved away to be a writer, and then I thought I felt pretty good about myself, and and then I went back for family reunion years later and found out that I had turned everything I was doing into a factory. The way I was writing, what I was doing to get poems ready for me. It's boring what I was doing. It's a tedious process, but that's the point. It was a factory. It was a tedious process. And I willed myself not to write anymore until I figured it out. And I woke up one morning and I started making lists of the problems with the factory. And toward the top of the list was inability to be present. And that's how I focused all of my attention from that moment on forward. And so I create these rituals to remain inside an extreme present so that I can't be anywhere else. And I love it. I do it all day long. You don't even know it. But this is a poem. So this book begins with an homage to a poem by a poet who you cared about when you didn't understand poetry too much, but also a poet who was deceased before you were born, because the book then ends with dealing with a poet who died while you were alive and you didn't get to meet and wish that you had met them. Hello. So for me, the poet was Emily Dickinson in the beginning. I would go to the library and Emily Dickinson was there because, it was the United States, so she's everywhere there, and she's amazing. And so this is what I did for Emily. It's called Anoint Thyself for John Coletti and Jess Mines. Visit the home of a deceased poet you admire and bring some natural thing back with you. I went to Emily Dickinson's house the day after a reading event with my friend Susie Timmons. I scraped dirt from the foot of huge trees in the backyard into a little pot. We then drove into the woods where we found miniature pears, apples, and cherries to eat. I meditated in the arms of an oak tree with a pot of Emily's dirt, waking to the flutter of a red cardinal on a branch a foot or so from my face, staring, showing me his little tongue. When I returned to Philadelphia, I didn't shower for 3 days, then rubbed Emily's dirt all over my body, kneaded her rich Massachusetts soil deeply into my flesh, then put on my clothes and went out into the world. Every once in a while, I stuck my nose inside the neck of my shirt to inhale her delicious, sweet earth covering me. I felt re-virginized through the ceremony of my senses. I could feel her power tell me these are the ways to walk and speak and shift each glance into total concentration for maximum usage of our little allotment of time on a planet. Lose and waste no more time, poet. Lose and waste no more time, she said to me as I took note after note on the world around me for the poem. The poem is titled, Emily Dickinson Came to Earth, and Then She Left. Your sweaty party dress and my sweaty party dress lasted a few minutes until the tomato was gone. Someday they will disambiguate you, but not while I'm around. Our species won, Emily. We won. It feels so good to be winning. The flame of victory, pass it around, and never goes out. Dinosaurs ruled Massachusetts. Dinosaurs fucking and laying eggs in Amherst, Boston, Mount Holyoke. Then you appeared, High Priestess, pulling it out of the goddamn garden with both hands. You, Emily, remembered the first time comprehending a struck match can spread a flame. It feels good to win this fair and square. Protest my assessment all you want, but not needing to dream is like not needing to see the world awaken to itself. Indestructible epiphanies consume the path. And just because you're having fun doesn't mean you're not going to die. Recrimination is the fruit to defy with unexpected appetite. I will be your outsider if that's how you need me. Electric company's stupid, threatening letters cannot affect a poet who has faced death. So this is a new chapbook that came out from this wonderful press called Good Morning Menagerie out of Washington, D.C. They're terrific. And the title of this chapbook is the title poem that I'm going to read to you. It's called You Don't Have What It Takes to Be My Nemesis. And it comes from It comes from, well, you'll see what it comes from. But so when I was younger, I started writing the Book of Frank that you so beautifully, thank you so much, mentioned. And when I started writing the Book of Frank, well, it's a long story, but so there was a little chapbook that came out, and I was part of the Lollapalooza concert in 1994, and one of those made its way to one of the last living Black Mountain College poets, Jonathan Williams, who had published Mina Loy, Robert Creeley, some of my favorite poets, and I was so excited that he contacted me and said, "Do you have more of these?" And I said, "I can't stop writing them. I have many, many of them." And he wanted to publish a book. It was going to be his last book, and he wound up passing away, and that was very sad. And then Wave Books published it. But getting to work with Jonathan Williams was amazing. He was a student of Charles Olson's, and I would bother him continuously with my questions about Olson. He would get really irritated with these questions. But occasionally, so we would have this like completely bizarre editing process where he would have a videotape playing a favorite baseball game. He had a stack of these with the TV muted, a symphony playing too loud for anybody to really hear it, and then smoking a cigar, some scotch in a glass, and then in the fireplace, another TV playing a video of a burning building. And so this was editing time. And if he didn't like a poem, he would say, "This is shit," and he would throw it over here, and it would be shit in the sky. And I would argue with him, and then But occasionally he would like to give me some wisdom. And one of those evenings when the symphony quieted down, he said, and he had a very deep voice. I'll try. I don't know. I'm not very good at that, but we know. He said, "You're in your 20s. I said, "Well, yes, I am." Like, what are you going to say? And he said, "When you're in your 20s, poetry is all stardust and magic. When you're in your 30s, it's all about building community, and I can tell you're going to be one of those people with your chapbook press and your poetry reading series. But when you turn 40, that's when some of you and your friends will get published and some of you will not. And that's when shit's going to get weird." And I said, "Oh, no, that's your generation, Jonathan. The hubris, thousands of years of asshole poets, like destroying one another." And I'm like, "Not my generation. We're beyond you all." Well, he was right. And that's what this is about. So I'm going to read the ritual and then the resulting poem. It's sort of something you do with haters, people who are just, it's a method. "You don't have what it takes to be my nemesis. For Dorothea Lasky, who also puts up with a lot of assholes. To the friend you thought was a friend until they tried to sabotage a publishing opportunity. To the one who ripped your book in half on stage, then wrote patronizing letters to the newspaper about how you should be writing and the poets you should be reading to become a real poet. To the creep who deleted your MP3 file because your reading was better than his. There are others, lying, conniving, envious sourpusses, without the courage to be loyal to the love of friends and shared ideas. But finally, to the worst of all, to the one you love the most, your trusted collaborator, the one who wreaked true havoc, the gifted sociopath, the one you always dreaded, but they found you. That one, the best liar you ever met who took a machete to your life, their drama akin to opera. Even still, they are given the parting words, "You don't have what it takes." Take notes about each of them for the poem. Their names are unimportant, as such cowards are rarely remembered. Create a line of tiny photographs of their faces on your computer, all in a row, then print it out. This will be the rolling paper for a cigarette. Cover their faces with equal amounts of the following dried ingredients: fennel seeds, pine needles, rose petals, mugwort, basil, white sage, red sandalwood powder, Purique tobacco, and marijuana. These ingredients calm negative thoughts, shift gears for transformation, and also invoke prophetic dreams, clairvoyance, happiness, honesty, peace of mind, and marijuana because you put up with a lot of shit and deserve to enjoy yourself. Roll it up, keep track of which enemy you're smoking, but smoke them all, sucking their faces into your lungs while writing notes for the poem. Notes about the ones who didn't have what it takes to beat you down. The ones who never deserved your friendship in the first place. Exhaling their faces on a parade of smoke is more satisfying than the usual forms of forgiveness. Find your poem in the notes and utterly relish your day. The poem is titled, I Feel So Lonely When You Touch Me. Like most people, ghosts want listeners. Inquiring gender of tree quaking in shade rips your collar to pieces. We meet ourselves whole at same time. Order of the way some will ruin themselves. Gentleness thrust into a clean glass. Ideate yes, angling a wider indulgence. You and your broken pencil write it's a writing world, but do get on with it. Listen to blood of trees imbuing interest rate with sunshine, suffering passed to a hired hand. So, this was a lot of fun, and I encourage you to try this one. It's called Suspension Fluid Magnificence for Samuel R. Delaney and Stephen Boyer. This is the ritual. When I was given my first rifle at 9, my friend Chris and I went into the woods. I was a good shot and skinned and cleaned the squirrel in the creek and cooked him over a small fire. This was the first meal I fully provided myself, my Lord of the Flies afternoon, something to measure against the world. How is wilderness memorized into the body? What lens does it provide? I went to where the wild is mostly hidden. At lunch hour, I walked around JFK Boulevard in Philadelphia, where men in suits poured out of skyscrapers in search of meat. It was at busy street corners where I found most of my study participants. I would ask, "Excuse me," on a scale from 1 to 5, 1 being thin and creamy, and 5 being cottage cheese, how do you rate your semen? One man grabbed me and threw me against a light pole. "Get out of here, you fucking faggot!" How thrilling. I was told to fuck off, called a faggot a handful of times, told I was sick, a degenerate. While all of this is interesting, I was looking for the few men who would step up to the quiet, feral interior. Finally, one man said, "I'm a 3. 3, okay, writing in my notebook. "So that's thick and creamy?" "Yes, no curd, haha." "Very interesting. Thanks for asking." "Thanks for answering." Another man wanted to know whether anyone answered 5. We wondered whether someone rating their semen a 5 is unwell or not eating properly. Semen is fascinating as far as suspension fluids on Earth go, created and produced with extreme pleasure. The orgasm, the flash of light, reconnecting to the original proliferation of cells and the construction of sensate flesh, which is a very marvelous thing, being here, all of us. My notes from the boulevard of quiet, feral interiors became a poem. If no one comes to save you, it's because of television. Carried away by fleas, one drop at a time. Quick nod to the doorman, like we belong here. Tooth-bearing sides to a job no one can frame. Juries of the middle-sized storm. Itching and thinking for another golden seesaw. Formula for taking the season and turning it into a pie. Pleasure in hard times gives us relief. until we all belonged to the song. We were crying in the meadow, but that was never the worry. This thing catches up with us. We dream inside each other, literally, and I've wanted to be lost in this friend you are, grunting to the will of coming beasts. Things mark themselves off for order until something expires in the order. We're going to end this now. There's nothing more nerves can haggle over. So I was addicted to Occupy Wall Street. It was such a glorious moment in the disgusting history of my nation. And I loved it. And I would argue with these baby boomers who were, a little older than me, my mother's generation, who would say, these kids, back in our time, we went to Washington, D.C. and blah, 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 blah. And I said, yeah, exactly. You got it wrong. They're going to the bosses of Washington, D.C., and they're in New York City on Wall Street. So I loved Occupy Wall Street, but Occupy Philadelphia was horrendous, in my opinion. I mean, there were great people there, and there were a lot of wonderful things going on, but a lot of pugilant, bossy, anarchist boys bossing everybody around. And I would get into these fights saying, you need to go to New York because that's where things are really going on. It's an egalitarian system unlike anything that I'd ever even dreamed was possible. I loved every minute of it. But I was so absolutely disturbed when the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell happened, because I'm opposed to these wars we're in, and I do not want my president making a politically correct militia to kill easier. So I catheterized myself as a somatic and walked around Occupy Philly. It was a little painful, but it was worth it. The pain kept shifting through my whole body while talking to people about war and oil consumption and gays in the military, and like just how incredibly stupid it is to think that it's a civil right to put a rainbow sticker on a machine gun and kill Arabs with impunity. And I do believe that the gay and lesbian community of the United States as a whole has Stockholm Syndrome at this point. And that's what this poem's about. It's titled, It's Too Late for Careful. Melting glaciers frighten me when appearing on my street as downpours. A feeling I send ahead of myself to one day walk inside. People sleep while I inspect their flowers. Not as weird as you think. I dreamt gays were allowed in the military. Isn't it great? Everyone said. What a nightmare, I said. Killing babies is less threatening with a politically correct militia. Vices for the vice box for wards of the forward state, who like different things to kill alike. We cannot occupy Wall Street, but we can occupy Kabul. Massage our anger with a heart chakra green, blessings soaked into bed sheets. There's a way of looking into time for a poem. Send it into the future. Your footprint has grown small. What is wrong with your footing? What kind of an American are you? Just buy it or steal it, but shut up. This poem is terrific for the economy. The rich have always tasted like chicken. I'm not a cannibal because they're not my kind. We cannot occupy Philadelphia, but we can occupy Baghdad. We're the kind of poets Plato exiled from the city limits. Fuck Plato, that paranoid faggot. Don't ask, don't tell. How about don't kill and say whatever you want? For instance, when I adopt a cat, I will name him Janae. Janae! Janae! I practice calling Janae into my life. When you purchase a car, the factory's pollution is 100% free. It's never easy waking to this. Bacteria and light, mucus and bone, a legacy of stardust. It is 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit inside all humans, the freshly murdered, their murderers, and the rest of us between. My father lived to see the fast forward to the cum shot, technology's authentic application. We cannot occupy Oakland, but the ghosts will occupy us. I will stay and watch our phoenix rise. I believe in us. Thank you. So, Jason Dodge, I don't know where you are, but thank you so much for bringing me. And Jason, he's amazing in so many ways, and he made this beautiful little book that there are copies of this evening. And this is from a ritual that I did, and I had a boyfriend. Instead of reading the ritual, it's very long. I'm just gonna tell you, I had a boyfriend who was murdered in Tennessee, in the hills of Tennessee. He was in Philadelphia. He was an AIDS activist and an environmental activist, and he was burnt out. And he went to Tennessee to work the land because it was healing. And he worked with the master gardener there, and I think that it was probably very healing. But I was on the phone with him, and he told me about this beautiful cave that he found that he was meditating in, and it sounded lovely, but people, I don't know who, but it's hard to tell who because the police covered up the murder. But he was bound and gagged and tortured and raped and covered in gasoline and burned to death. And there are these filmmakers, and it was very upsetting because the police wanted nothing to do with it, and that the police in the United States are so hyper-militarized at this point and feel like they can do whatever they want to anybody at any time, and it's frightening. And I'd be on the phone with the sheriff saying, you need to do something about this, and he would say, "Listen, faggot, you just stay where you are. If you come down here, we're going to arrest you." And it was just this like frightening, horrifying experience. And then there are these filmmakers. The film house is called Delinquent Films, and they're making a documentary about my books and my life. And they started investigating his murder, and they told me that we believe you. They spoke to the coroner, who the coroner said, "There's absolutely no way this could be a suicide," which is what it was written up as by the police. The coroner, said, "No, that's just ridiculous. You can't. How do you hogtie yourself and then pour gasoline on yourself?" And I mean, it's just so frustrating. It's unbelievable. And, but everything changed the moment the filmmakers, my life, changed the moment they told me that they were putting it in the documentary, that they were on my side, and we went to Tennessee. Anyway, I don't want to get into Tennessee, but after this, I was given the opportunity to go to the MacDowell colony, this marvelous artist colony in New Hampshire, and my mother just thought it was ridiculous. My mother has been poor all of her life. We lived in a car for half a year. We were like evicted, and she thought that I was robbing a bank. She was like, "Really? People are making you meals to write poems? That's the stupidest thing I ever heard." Anyway, she was wrong. It was beautiful. And the last time I saw my boyfriend before he went to Tennessee, he gave me a crystal, and I would put the crystal in my hair wrap and write through it. And I had this creepy movie that was in my head, this fiction that I created, where the murderers were captured, and there's a courtroom drama, and within a couple of weeks, that little film disappeared, and it's not returned. So these are some of the poems that go with that. A beautiful moving target is all you wanted to be. Aspiring future wilderness, you must know by now of the dark quiver, my wand genius. Shot back through same hole. Not everything allows for indulgence analogous to being open by morning. Fall forward, fall conjuring. Tell the farmer we cannot taste his milk, but wish to. Heard a library when I was blind in a dream. Sleep less now. Ambition is not what you think. break inside me. Break yourself up inside there. We can afford to get a jump at it. Poets can still reach into murk for it. Just feel through it. I want you to start writing your own poems. I want you to stop counting on mine made up like you want. Ambition carries the fear of death. It's not failure, but age you smell. I am often disgusted with life here without you. Despondence growing sinister. Ears grip movement of strings. Mouth grips balls to stomach the hazards of absence. Blood, semen, hair spit out window when everyone looks away. Envelop crystal. Swallow crystal. Yeah, that's another thing I did. I was swallowing a crystal every day, and then I would retrieve it from the toilet and then sterilize it. And then and I had to give a presentation, and the director was there, and at the end she said, "You mean you've been shitting crystals here this whole time?" And I said, "Yeah." And she's like, "That's great." She loved it. Envelop crystal, swallow crystal, thrust crystal up my ass to distract from 10,000 worries. Few things tire me more than imagining reincarnation, a child struggling all over again to not favor war, not surrender to greed. A finger in the web to give it back tenfold. Holding our gorged fragment as promise to change if we want change. Another evening to falter under the chrysalis. A wayward protein bloodletting from unforeseen orifice gathers us to elongated grass-fed hours, falling victim to the song and its silken casing. Too urgent for punctuation, coping with an inferior century foaming over the rim. A smile hanging on the face as though it will pay off. But then it does pay off. We didn't think we could open up like this. Here we are, living in the better place to know. The mountain throat temple is our uncontrollable humming from meditating on Mount Monadnock. Paint over the dead-end signs. Are police writers? Yes. They are writing into books our little cherub of misunderstanding, of thinking to push us back into body of the whole. Love yourself more next time, their reports read. Stones sink as they please, a lit cigarette into our dark hello. This is exactly the kind of space I want to follow you into, holding your little mute worm on a twig. The next morning doesn't have to be unpleasant, I say to convince myself. Leaf closing on closeness of mothers of the next world. Overseeing premium waste of the planet. Things are like this now. What was it you wanted us to say after you died? It's awful without you making sound exist. You said, "Ponder this," but none of us can remember. What now, dear? Please speak up. When quaking became zeal to open, nothing now but a medieval barking gargoyle. Whoever gave you the tambourine shall be sheriff of my tender zoo. I am not here. I am in the future, where I have always been. Please hurry back and forth to kiss me, my ghost. I'm going to finish by reading from the Book of Frank. I'm going to try that microphone now. And, but don't let anybody take my drink tickets. They're right there. How's this microphone working, all right? Okay. So, the Book of Frank. I wrote this over a 16-year period, and that's all I'm going to say. When Frank was born, Father inspected the small package the nurse handed him. "But where's my daughter's cunt? My daughter has no cunt." Mother leaned from the bed. "This is your awful son, dear. Your son has no cunt." "Why doesn't my son have a cunt? What has happened? What a wicked world, dark and spinning on its one good leg." So this next one I like to dedicate to former President George W. Bush and his insane mother, Barbara Bush, because sometimes at breakfast, I don't think every morning from what I understand, but there's in the memoir, George W. Bush's memoir, he mentions his mother showing him a miscarried fetus, I think it was, in a jar of formaldehyde. Yeah, and then look what happened. It's a nightmare. Frank hated the 9 miscarriages kept in jars of formaldehyde. Mother burped each one, spooned peas against the glass. She rocked them all at once in her arms, no room for Frank. You are too big for a jar, my child. You will betray me the rest of your life. At the dinner party, Frank lost his fruit cup. He looked under the table, saw how people touched themselves even at dinner parties, zipper stroked, knees reacquainted with palms, his eyes clouded in jubilation. But where is Frank, they asked, while on their laps the only answer was a tiny, mysterious violet. This daisy in my mouth, Frank says, is a snorkel breathing another dimension. Frank ate clear around the sleeping worm of the apple. Any life saved in this place is magic, Frank said. It's life coming back to you. Frank hammers carrots all day. It works. The earth can't leave us. This next piece is true, by the way. I have family in the military, and some of them paint airplanes for the Air Force. So this is actually just right off of the base. Mother knew where the next war was before Frank by the colors they made her paint the airplanes. They were painting those airplanes before we even landed in Baghdad. Father was drunk and yelling, and rule number 9, everybody dies. Upon hearing rule number 9, Frank suddenly forgot all other rules. Frank grew crows for hands. It was a difficult childhood. At dinner during prayer, his crows flapped excited in the name of the Lord. Frank, keep still, Mother hollered. Did you wash your crows? Did you wash your filthy, stinking crows? When Father died, Frank was found straddling him, his crows picking the 7 gold fillings. Frank saw a giant eat a park bench with her vagina, drink a swimming pool with her vagina. I saw her swallow the baby and spit out the crib, Frank said. He tiptoed past her snoring uterus one night and heard a few familiar voices cry out. Monkeys inside Frank ascend until his bare face is covered. Frank knows a butterfly who wonders about her old caterpillar friends. Frank puts 4, 5, 6 sticks of dynamite in his mouth. He lights a match, imagines the gold it'll knock out of his head. This is for Jonathan Williams. I dedicate this page to him because this is when he was very sick in the hospital, and I wanted to cheer him up. Frank is grateful for the ride, but knows most trucks carry semen stains. Looking for these? The driver asked, pointing to eager swimmers long since dried on radio, ashtray, cup holder. From the menu of dead authors, Frank orders Emily Dickinson's breast with dumplings and the braised thigh of an East Inn. His wife orders Leo Tolstoy's ring finger with caviar and the candied genitals of Jack Kerouac. Kerouac's erection arrives, shimmering in gravy. She says, nibbling the tip. Frank glares and stabs a breast. Oh, that's a nice sound. I like that. Don't be sorry. It's lovely. Is no one else sick of this paralysis of gravity, Frank asks. When I was a boy, I stepped into the sky, and I was a boy, not a surrealist. Part of the dream is that you accept your waking life as part of the dream. Frank remembers shirts of buried generals flying in formation over schoolyards, blowing wasps from sleeves. After his suicide, Frank returned to Earth a fancy-tailed goldfish his wife bought at the pet store for her 3 Amazona piranhas. She held the tip of Frank's tail and called into the green water, "Dennis! John! Carla! Soup's on!" Thank you for having me.